So changes to your work is part of being a writer, right? But there are different ways and different steps that we can take to kind of deal with that part of the process and deal with the editing and deal with whether or not we should take the changes or whether or not we should say, like, why are we doing this and why are we making this change? So today we're going over that. And I think that's really important because feedback and edits are just a normal part of the writing process, right? We submit our work to our clients and we wonder, okay, how is this going to go? And for me, whenever I get a new client, I'm often thinking about like stabs in the dark. I'm like, okay, well, is this close or is this like, am I kind of hitting the target? Like, where are we going? So whenever you submit your first work for the client, always keep in mind that you're kind of like testing the waters, basically. So you're trying to figure out, like, is what I'm thinking the same thing as you're thinking? Even though you have a brief and even though you follow directions, sometimes you get, there's misinterpretations or mistakes or whatever. So when you're kind of thinking about doing these edits and the first time you submit work, this is part of the process of getting used to working with that client. What are they looking for? What are the specifics that are useful for that client? What are the things that really stick out to them? And this is kind of something that I've been talking about with perfectionism as well. Your idea of perfection in your work is different than your client's idea of perfection. So your client may come back and say, wow, your work was amazing, like, good job. And you're like, okay, cool, like, I did it right. But they don't always explain to you what you did right or what they really liked. So then you're stuck in this thing where you're like, what I did was perfect, so what I think is perfect for them. And that's not always the case. They may be looking at, a whole bunch of different things in your work that they really like, but you're looking at a whole bunch of other things that you like and they're not the same. So the deal is when we're doing these edits and getting feedback, this is a normal part of the process, but there's a way to deal with the hard parts of doing edits and the hard parts of dealing with making changes or kind of getting your work to a better level. So what we're talking about is when we're dealing with negative feedback, this is what we should do. Here's some steps. So let's talk about number one. Number one, where's my number one? There it is. So number one, this is normal. Let's normalize this. Edits and feedback are normal. Harsh edits and negative feedback can be normal. It can be part of the process where like one editor or one client you work with is just used to giving very open and honest feedback. And sometimes we're not used to receiving it, right? Like we're not used to someone saying like, this sucks, fix this here, whatever. For me, when I started getting feedback on my writing, I knew, like just from being a writer and going to college for writing and writing a lot of papers, right, that this is part of the process. You get feedback and changes and edits and information about making it better or whatever. And I think the initial thing to think about is not taking it personally. So when you're kind of doing these edits and when you're kind of putting things together, don't take it personally that you're the worst writer ever or that they hate your work or that you did a really shitty job. Don't take it personally because I think the idea is, and I often go to food metaphors, but just because a restaurant makes a bad dish doesn't mean that restaurant is terrible. Or just because a farmer has a bad season, that doesn't mean that that farmer is a bad farmer, right? It just means that there are extenuating circumstances that kind of affected that. And whether that's a dish at a restaurant where they just combine these really weird ingredients and to them it tastes good and to their customer they're like, what is this? No. It's not something that you should take personally and that you're a horrible writer or you made a mistake. There are millions of clients out there, and it could be that this client is just not your client. Like they're just not, you guys aren't on the same wavelength, and that's fine. What you think might be a good match, and when you turn in your work, they're like, what is this? I don't get it. There's sometimes just a mismatch. Like there's sometimes a mismatch in how you put your work together or how you think about the content or how you're dealing with the structure of the piece, how you think about how the ideas should flow. Sometimes there's just a big difference. So don't take it personally. I think it's more about this one piece. It's not about your whole portfolio or your whole identity as a writer. It's just about dealing with this one piece. So the first thing is just like, don't take it personally and realize that it's just one article or one case study or one piece of content that you've created. And then as you go along, if you keep getting the same edits and the same feedback, you need to fix your writing process. You need to kind of pay attention to that. If you have like a one-off comment where someone said something and you're like, that's weird, none of my clients have said that, or that's weird, I just didn't recognize that in my writing, keep it in your, keep it in your noodle, write it down and pay attention to it, right, as you go along. But the deal is that just because you get bad feedback or you get harsh feedback on a piece doesn't mean that you should take it personally and start saying like, I'm a bad writer and I can't do this. It's not the case. Yeah, this is great. Margaret says that client is more like peanut butter and Cheetos rather than peanut butter and jelly. Exactly. Sometimes it's just this mismatch. Oh my gosh, you can't start making noises now. We just started. Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is exactly it. So like, basically think of it as, it's not about like you, it's not a personal thing. It's just about this particular article. And I think this is great, Margaret. I personally have gone, like I have coaching students, right? I do one-on-one coaching and I have Freelance Writer Wealth Lab, which is my course. And I give people feedback and it's just like my unvarnished, but also nice opinion of what they're doing, right? And sometimes people are like, oh my God, you think I'm doing a terrible job. And it's like, no, I've just gotten used to the flow of information in that manner of like, how can I help you get better if I don't tell you all these things? Like, how can we actually make this a good website or a good LinkedIn profile or a good piece, like a good sample for you if I don't give you what I think your clients are looking for or what I've noticed in your work or what I've noticed being a writer for 10 years, right? Or actually it's more than that, but that I think is a thing that writers have to get used to is there's going to be writers who give you harsh feedback. That's just their style is to just tell you like, this sucks, fix it. And you're like, oh my God, it sucks. What am I going to do? And it's just, it's not personal. They're just like in their mind. They're just like, this sucks, do this thing. Like to me, it's a non-emotional tone. Like when I'm going through someone's work, like if you've ever gotten feedback from me, and I'm sure a lot of you have, Vesna has, Margaret, I think you might have too. Morning, Vesna. Morning, Margaret. Glad you're here. So if anybody's ever gotten feedback from me, I always take it in this like non-emotional tone unless I'm excited, right? The emotion I get is like, yes, this is the best, gold star, keep this. Like there's that. But most of the time when I'm giving like edits, I'm saying it in a non-emotional, like, hey, this needs to be fixed. Hey, think about that. Do this like a monotone, like Bueller kind of deal. And I think writers are often reading it with the tone and emotion that they have this little voice in their head telling them that they're a shitty writer, right? So they hear it in that voice rather than the editor being like, fix this thing. Or like, whatever. Hi, woo-woo. Woo-woo. Do you want to be... Oh, I thought I fixed this, but I guess I didn't. Hello, friends. Hello, woo-woo friends. There we go. Now everybody's in the picture. Charlotte, how can you sit like that? You just look so ridiculous sometimes. Like you're just like a little Frenchy sass bean. All right, let's see if we can get everybody on there without it being messed up. There we go. Well, I guess that's where it was. All right, buddy. Can you catch these? These are smaller. Ready? 1, 2, 3, dog. Nope, it's too small. Here you go. High five. Other one. Good job. Did you get it, Barry? Good job, buddy. I have different size treats now. These are very small. So let me show you the difference just since we're taking a little break. So this is one of the ones that I normally throw them, and this is the size I have now. So when you have a 15-and-a-half-year-old dog who is he's like going to turn 16 in 6 months. Yeah, May. Yeah. So in November, he'll turn 16. Like this is a big deal. This is hard for him to deal with. So Barry, I think I'll throw you the big ones and give me the little ones. Ready, buddy? Hold on. Ready? 1, 2, 3, dog. Oh, so close. It's right in front of you, buddy. It's literally right in front of you. Can you back up? Back up. Back up. Back up. All the way. Good job. All right. So don't take it personally and kind of read the edits more in a monotone voice. So when you're kind of going through dealing with this negative feedback, don't take it personally. It's just part of the process of writing, and it's taking two brains or multiple brains and converging on one article or one case study or whatever. That's just part of the process. The other part that you should think about is that you can't become a better writer without feedback. You just can't. You can't do it. Without getting feedback from editors, without getting feedback from clients, without reading your own work, hundreds and thousands. Like I've read my work probably like millions of times by now because, when you edit it, you read it so many times. And when you write it, you read it so many times. And that's just part of the process is like learning that and understanding that in order to get better, you need outside eyes looking at your work. And this is part of just, okay, this is a good story. This is a story my dad has been telling me since forever. Like since I can remember, my dad told me this story. And I think this is a really good example. So when Tom Clancy wrote Hunt for Red October, he turned in the book, right? He finished it. He was like, I did it. I finished it, you know, and he turned it in, and they were like, that's nice, but this is garbage. Go back and rewrite the whole thing. And my dad's been telling me this story since forever, and I've always kept it in the back of my mind. So Tom Clancy at the time, you know, he wasn't an unknown writer. Like he was, if I remember right, he like had some books out. Like he wasn't a rando just turning in a book. So, and it might have been his first book, but he had been writing, like it was a thing. So he turned it in, and they were like, this is hot garbage. This is trash. Like, good job for turning it in, but you need to go rewrite the whole thing. So he didn't give up. He didn't give up and be like, oh, well, I guess my publisher thinks this book is trash. I better just like give up and I'm a terrible writer. No, he went back and he rewrote the whole thing. And now it's, you know, this huge book that has movies and all this, right? It's this huge thing. And this is just part of the process. And the same thing goes for like J.K. Rowling, right? Or Rowling, or however you say her last name, right? When she wrote Harry Potter, she took it to 26 publishers and everyone was like, no one's going to believe in this wizarding stuff. This is trash. And then someone finally gave it a chance, right? And then all of the readers loved it. The publishers didn't get it, but the readers loved it. This is just part of it. And she had to rewrite a lot of the first book. She had to rewrite a bunch of stuff. So this is part of the process. And I'm trying to normalize this in the context of books, but like you imagine you spend time writing 100,000 words. You write 100,000 words, right? The average book could be anywhere. I think if I remember right, the average book is like 50 or 60,000 words to 100,000 plus words. Let's just say 100,000 words. Stop wooing at me. I have stuff to say. Woo woo. I hear you wooing. I hear you wooing. I hear you wooing. You'd be in a sass factory. Okay. So let's imagine you write 100,000 words, not 1,000 words like you would for a normal article, but you write 100,000 words and someone comes to you and says, you need to start over. That's nice. Start over, right? That's way more devastating than one. Hello. Are you stuck? Stuck in your blankie? Hi. That's way more devastating than one 1,000 word article or 10 1,000 word articles or whatever. So keep that in the back of your mind. This is a normal part of the process. Don't take it personally, right? They weren't telling Tom Clancy that he was a terrible writer. Oh, and I think the same thing happened to Dan Brown when he was writing the, the fancy Tom Hanks movies with like the murder and the clergy. Why am I blanking on that? You know, Dan Brown that wrote all of the like church conspiracy stuff with Tom Hanks. And if you guys know what I'm talking about, put it in the chat or the comments. Like, but you know what I'm talking about, like the movie with Tom Hanks where he's hunting and all the clergy are dying and the conspiracy stuff. And it doesn't matter. Dan Brown had to rewrite a bunch of stuff. Tom Clancy had to rewrite a bunch of stuff. It doesn't mean, and their books are bestsellers. It doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It's just that you have to fix it. You have to get feedback to become a better writer. Da Vinci Code. Thank you, Margaret. Yes. So that kind of stuff is the difference, right? The difference is, had they not done those edits, their books might not have been successful. Or had they not gotten that feedback, they wouldn't have become a better writer. Had they given up and taken it personally, and when like, oh, well, I guess I suck at this, I'll just give up. Like, they wouldn't have what they have. So don't take it personally and understand that it's part of the process. Vesna says, I always have to remind myself not to add emotion when I read edits. I'd rather things are found before it gets published. Yes, this is a good point. Another point here is that when let's say your work gets published and the people reading it are like, why was this published? This is trash. Then you're like, oh crap, our editor, like my editor and I should have caught this. Like, what's happening? You know, we made a mistake. It's like when something gets published and someone makes a mistake, like one spelling mistake, or they make one grammar mistake and everyone's like, oh my God, you guys are the worst editors ever. Like, we're still humans, number one. But the other thing is that, yeah, you want things to be found before it gets published. You don't want someone just to like accept all your work and be like, gold star, and then it gets published and everyone hates it. Hey, Marie, welcome in. So that's another thing, is we want things to be found before it's published, and we want to understand the edits. Like, some of the best writing advice I've ever gotten has come from, what are you doing under the camera? get out of there, has come from editors and come from clients that are like, you should think about this. And I'm like, oh my God, I never thought about that. Those are the best things, is like people who can look at your work and open your eyes. And I get people who are like, oh my gosh, I love your work. Like, I read this thing that you wrote, or like, I love your piece on this. And I'm like, that's because I listened to all these edits. My work got better because I did the things they asked me to do. And that's part of the process. Like, you need someone to look at your work from like a non-biased perspective most of the time. And when you don't take it personally, and when you kind of have this growth mindset, when you have the mindset that, hey, I'm always growing, I'm always improving. Yeah, I don't suck at writing. There's no like absolutes. If you kind of live in this growth mindset where you're like, I'm learning. I'm learning as a writer. I'm learning to get better. And if you, oh my gosh, you guys are sassy today. So if you have other writers that you look up to, like, this is something I keep in my noodle too, is that there are writers that I look up to. The only way that they became those writers that you look up to is because they took feedback. They took edits. They understood the process. They figured out what they needed to do to become better writers. People don't just like write the same way forever, right? That's why some people end up having bestsellers and the end of their career is terrible. Maybe they never grew. They never expanded and took the feedback. They just kept writing the same style, the same thing over and over again. And people were like, okay, like, what's new? But I think that the writers you look up to and the work that you see is an amalgamation of all the edits and all the feedback and all the changes and learning to get a better writer. Like, keeping that learner's mindset and that growth mindset about your writing is super important. So let's go, we're going to do a pup date, and then we're going to get to point 2. All right. Can you guys go back to your, like, I'm being harassed. I'm being harassed. Go back to your hobbit hole. Go back to your other hobbit hole. You can't sit in her hobbit hole because now she... All right, Barry, I'm going to throw one over there. Ready, buddy? Go get it. Because she doesn't like it when you sit on her. Hey, Getty, welcome in. Glad you're here. All right, let's do our little high fives. High five. Good girl. Other one. Other one. Good job. All right. Let's see. Wonder if I can do this. There we go. Ta-da! All right, Minnie, can you do your high five? Good job. Good job. Other one. Good girl. All right. Barry, ready? Barry, we're going to have to buy these big treats for you because you're like those old people that need like the big eye chart. Ready? Good job, buddy. Good job. I wonder if I can get it to like balance out. There we go. That purple thing you just saw is one of their dog toys. Here you go. Other one. Good job. Bless you. High five. Good girl. High five. Oh, good girl. All right, buddy. One more. Ready, bud? Oh, sorry, buddy. Did you get it? Wait. Okay. We almost had a disaster, but I think we're okay. All right. So, no, go back to your hobbit hole. There you go. Lay down. Lay down. Good boy. They're a little antsy because they've been locked in a bunch. We have like, they're allowed to like go outside whenever they want normally, but we're getting our fence fixed, so we don't want them to run away. So they've been inside more than outside, so they're a little antsy-pantsy. Marie says, a friend who wrote fiction in a love scene interspersed with dialogue had to get the heroine out of bed, putting down one foot, then another in the published version. Yeah, so that would be weird. So it's probably just the edits. It's just the changes in their work, right? That's part of it. All right, let's talk about 2. Hold on. Let me find my 2. There it is. Okay, so number 2 here. So we need to figure out which advice we should and shouldn't take. Now, this comes from trust. I think that this is a really important thing. So I always kind of start my relationships with editors. Sorry. Sorry. Ooh, okay. So I always start with the idea that my clients or my editors are coming from the viewpoint of their ideal clients or their ideal readers. So the feedback they're giving me is through the eyes of who will be reading the piece. So if you come through it that way, your end goal is to make the piece great for the reader. Yes, we have to meet the editor's expectations and the client expectations and all that stuff, but the end goal is always like, who's reading this and what are they going to do with it? So I always kind of imagine that the editor and the client are like, my audience wants this. My audience doesn't understand this phrase. My audience, like, I always kind of think of it that way. So when I'm taking their advice and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, does their audience really want that? So like at first I'm like, okay, they're coming from the viewpoint of their audience. And then my fact checking double check, right? My double check is like, do I know their audience well enough to say, do they or don't they want that? And most of the time, I'll just tell you, like, I do like 99.9% of edits. Like if someone comes to me and says, fix this thing, I just do it because I either know their audience well, I know the magazine well, I know who their clientele are. I understand that they're coming at it like saying, hey, like we need to fix this thing because our product, this is a confusing explanation of our product or our service. So I do the edits because I know that they need to be done in this certain way for the audience and in this certain way for the client or the magazine. And I have, the idea of what it should be. So I know there's a lot of writers who push back on edits, and they're coming from this place of like, I always kind of feel like they push back on edits because they're taking it very personally. They're like, no, the piece has to have this phrase because da 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 da. It doesn't have to have anything, right? The piece could be 10,000 words, but you only get 1,000 words on the page. So it could be anything. And I feel like the whole point that we're working together is to make great content. If you start pushing back a ton and on every edit, you're pushing back against growth. You're pushing back against understanding why they want that edit. You can always ask questions. But I know that there's a lot of writers who are like, I don't do a ton of edits. Like they just refuse to do them, or when they write for a magazine, they're just like, no, this compromises the integrity of the piece or whatever. I just feel like that is not applicable. Like I feel like the goal is to make great content, and to make great content together, you have to compromise and you have to understand why you're making those compromises and how they help the reader. So I do 99% of the edits, maybe 90%. I do them all. And if I'm confused about something, I ask a question. But I'm coming from a place of like, they understand their audience, their clientele better, maybe better than I do. And two, I have knowledge and experience to double check that. If I don't have knowledge and experience to double check that, ask those questions. Okay, I don't understand why we're making this edit. Can you walk me through why this matters? Can you understand what's confusing about it? Get on a call with someone and talk through it. The other piece is that I always kind of give everybody the benefit of the doubt, right? When someone's coming to you and saying, make these changes, you're like, okay, like you trust that that's what they want and that's the direction they should go in. And you kind of, build that trust over time. And for me, like when you're working with certain magazines, like, so those editors sometimes have been there for 20 years or 30 years. It's not as common anymore. People move around a lot more, but some editors are still there for 10, 20, 30 years. And they have a lot of experience. So trusting them is a little bit more like, that holds a lot more water. You can trust them that they're asking you to do the right stuff for that publication or for that client. The other thing is that when you're looking through things, most of the time, those edits are making your work better. I have found this like 9 times out of 10, right? 90% of the time when I am asked to make edits, it makes my work better. So then why am I fighting the process of my work getting better? I think that when people kind of like get so personally involved in a story and then they're like, well, we can't do that because then it changes this thing. I think that that's not as applicable. Like most of the time when I do edits, almost every single time it makes the work better. And over time, I build trust with my client so that they understand my work and I understand why I'm making these changes. And like, I trust them to catch mistakes in my work. I trust them to say that this doesn't align with their whatever it is, or I trust them enough to do what they ask, right? Like the edits that you shouldn't take are anything. Yes, woo woo. I see you wagging your tail. The edits you shouldn't take come from people that you have seen over and over again ruin the quality of your work. Now I've gotten many. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Woo woo. Woo woo. We're not woo wooing right now. We're not woo-wooing right now. You can get some pets. So the edits you shouldn't take, I get notes in my inbox about people who are like, hey, my client or my editor made these edits and it's making my piece confusing, or it's ruining the quality of my work. And that happens. Sometimes there's people and editors who give you negative feedback and they just want to put their hands in the honeypot. Like they just want to kind of touch all the things that go through that magazine for no other reason other than they want to touch them. Like they're like, I did it. Like that's proof that they touched it or paid attention, right? And anytime you notice like that there is a clear quality issue, that's when you really need to be careful about taking those edits. When anything is confusing or anything is leading the reader astray or false information or something where you're worried that it could be misinterpreted by the reader or it's something that is just really weird, that's when you need to raise questions. And that's when you should be like, okay, we kind of need to like pay attention to this. That doesn't mean we're taking away trust. It's just like a thing on our radar, like one little boop on the radar, boop, boop, one little thing that we need to watch for in terms of doing whether or not we do those edits and whether or not we ask questions about those edits. Anytime you find that the quality is suffering, and this can happen, right? People like they have responsibilities at the office and their boss is like, you need to edit this. And then they're like, well, someone told me I need to do it, so I need to do it. And if it suffers in quality, like sometimes there's a mismatch. And this can happen with red light clients where like they believe they're a better writer than you. And maybe at the time, maybe by some magic they are, but most of the time they're not. They think that they're making the piece better and you notice that it's making the piece worse. Be careful about those edits. But you need to explain yourself. You can't just say like, no, I'm not going to do this and not give them an explanation. If they change something, you can go back and make a note and say, hey, I think this is confusing because of A, B, C. Maybe we should change it to this instead and kind of compromise in the middle between what you said and what they said. And most of the time they're like, oh yeah, you're right. I reread it and da-da-da-da-da. But I think the curiosity, the explanation, like the curiosity of asking questions, the explanation of like why it makes sense to do it a different way is a lot easier to convince people to make something that they changed into low quality back to high quality. Anytime that you see someone that messes with your work and makes it confusing, not understandable, jumpy, lower in quality, like all of those things should be raising your radar where you're like, hey, we need to kind of talk this through. Like get on a call with them, talk about what's going on. And there are edits. Ready, buddy? I don't know if you can catch this. It's too low for you. Back up, Minnie. Back up, Minnie. There are edits. There you go. That you should not take. And most of those edits are confusing, befuddled. They make the piece worse. They make it a bad transition. Like the piece makes a weird jump. It's ruining the quality. It's ruining the style or tone that like moves far away from what they're going for. All of these things are very obvious. Those are the edits you should not take. Hey, Jennifer, welcome in. Okay, Getty, I see a comment in here. So Getty says, the choir that I belong to just printed a variety of beautiful and colorful concert promo materials for our forthcoming June 11th concert. Someone noticed the text error, June 11th. Oh no, 2021. Yeah, which is a bummer, but it happens, right? That kind of stuff happens. It's just like people are human. They make mistakes. That's a bummer. But yeah, these kind of errors happen. And that was probably an edit they should have taken when someone's like, hey, the year is wrong. But yeah, that's a huge bummer. And totally an expensive error. And that's another thing about edits, right? Should you take, if you don't take edits, right, it could be that they print your story, like it's physically printed, right, in a magazine with stuff that's not as good. And then it's there forever. Like they're not going to reprint the magazine, right? And I think that when you're thinking about edits and harsh feedback and things that you should and shouldn't take, you have to have trust in your clients. You have to build a relationship with them. You have to understand that most of the time they're motivated by what their audience is going to be liking and reading because they want clicks, likes, shares, downloads, more sales, like they're motivated by that thing doing a lot of work. Our content oftentimes is a big workhorse, but you need to understand what types of things like stick out in your radar as being things you should ask questions about, edits you should not take, and things you should, have a call about or go through the reason why they made these changes or why it makes more sense to them. And yeah, like the same thing where sometimes your clients go through the document really quickly and they don't even, they're not thinking about it as deeply as you and they make mistakes. And that's cool too. We're all humans. People make mistakes. Editors make mistakes. Like even editors who have been editors at magazines for long, long periods of time, right? that's just part of being a human is we make mistakes. But when we're talking about comments and edits, we need to be careful about what we do and don't take. And I said, like 9 times out of 10, 90% of the time, the edits you get are going to be worthwhile, no matter if their tone is harsh or then it's really negative or it's hard to take. Most of the time, it's making your work better. Marie says, I had a client who fixed my work and loved what I did. I do a small amount of work for them, but I don't use it for my portfolio. Sometimes it's just releasing the end result. Yeah, that's another thing. So let's talk about that for number 3. So I'm going to pop number 3 up here, and we're going to do a quick update. Oh my gosh, every time you guys move around, it's like I've moved this camera to try to get everybody on the thing, and then everybody moves. All right, buddy. I think these are too little for you. Boop. Boop. Good job. All right, one more. Other one. Good job. Peekaboo. All right. Good job, everybody. So, yeah, dog drool over my hand. So the third thing is we're going to talk about number 3, how to create this mindset. We want to create this mindset where we're not worrying about criticism so much. And that's part of releasing the end result. Sometimes, very rarely is what I've found, sometimes you're going to end up with a piece that you just don't like, something you don't want to put in your portfolio, something you're not proud of, something that the client or editor insists is like, is the thing that they want, and it just doesn't work for you. And that's okay. We can just let it go. Remember my boat metaphor. So I bring this up all the time. I have my paper origami boat, right? My paper origami boat, and I'm standing on the beach, and my paper origami boat serves as my work. It serves as whatever work I'm going to submit. So I stand on the beach. I have this very clear image of what it looks like. I stand on the beach and I take my little paper origami boat and I put it out in the ocean. I give it a little push and I'm like, goodbye, buddy. I worked really hard on it. It's very intricate paper boat. It's got all these, folds and all this important stuff, and you let it go out into the ocean of uncertainty, which is what happens when you submit your work. You're just kind of like, all right, buddy, like we tried. And for me, that was a big release, is like, I'm not tied to the idea anymore. And I used to be. I'm not tied to the idea anymore that like I have failed if I get a bunch of harsh edits or if I made a mistake. Like, I'm more tied to the idea that I know I worked really hard. I know that I was diligent. I know I did the best that I could under the circumstances, and I did the best that I could under the time frame of the deadline. That took me a long time to get there, but having this idea of just releasing that into the world and being like, all right, good luck, buddy. That gave me a lot of relief away from the pressure of like what the end result would be. Like what Maria's saying is like, whether or not I choose to put that in my portfolio is my own choice. And then whether or not that piece ends up being really great or really terrible based on edits, I still have the choice to release it and be like, you know what? I've written, I don't know, hundreds of articles, hundreds of pieces, right? And this one piece or these 10 pieces are just ones I'm not proud of out of the hundreds that I've made. That's like less than 1%. All right, cool, whatever. So when we're talking about hold on, let me pop this off. So when we're talking about, did I just delete the thing I needed? No. Okay, good. So the mindset when we're going into it is that you have done your best work within the time frame with what you have. You're not a robot. You can't 100% know everything about the topic. It's not possible. Like, even people who do research for decades and decades on one thing, right? They research happiness in this small time frame, or they research this one type of cancer, or they don't know everything. That's why they're doing all that research, right? That's why they're continuing all this stuff. That's just part of being a human. You won't know everything ever. So you have to release this idea that you're getting these edits because you didn't know what you were doing. Now, sometimes you get edits because you really didn't know what you were doing and you flubbed it, and that happens sometimes too. Most of the time that's not the case, but yes, there are times as writers where we write something and we didn't know enough about the topic and we rushed through it and it was garbage stuff and we turned it in because we had to turn it in and we're like, ugh, and then we have to do a bunch of edits, and that's our own fault. But most of the time when you're submitting your work, I have found that, I came to the realization over many years, this is, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, that I was working really hard, and I was trying to find all the information I could, and that I was trying to do all these, like, I started looking at the facts of me submitting my work. Okay, well, I'm definitely doing my best. I'm definitely being diligent. I'm separating out my writing process so that I know I'm spending the right amount of time getting these things done, or I'm putting in the right amount of effort, and I feel good when I submit it. Like, I'm not worried so much about the outside feedback, because I know from my own process that I'm doing a good job and I'm working hard and I'm doing the best I can. And once I came to that realization, then I don't worry so much about the end result, and I don't worry so much about the criticism, because that's their idea, I have my idea, and then the readers have their own idea. So we need to kind of collaborate on all of those things, but it doesn't mean that getting edits means you didn't do it perfectly or you didn't do a good job. The mistakes and the feedback are a necessary part of becoming a better writer. But you have to adopt this mindset. Like, if you want to take the boat thing, go and run with it. I have found that that has been just so freeing for me to be like, the boat of my work, this little origami paper boat, it's so little, you know, it's like in my mind, it's like the size of a softball, basically. And I put it out on this ocean of uncertainty. That's what you do when you submit your work. And if it helps too, you know, there's always that idea from Brene Brown and a bunch of other smart people. It's all right. You're in the arena, right? You are in the arena, and then there's people in the stands. Kind of think about it that way. You're in the arena. And as you know, I'm sure, because writers edit their own work and edit other people's work, it is a lot easier to edit something that's already been created than to create it from scratch, right? It's a lot easier to go and look at a painting and go look at a statue and be like, why didn't you do this? And why did you do this? And what is this here? And couldn't you have done this better? It's a lot easier to critique than it is to write, to actually create it from scratch. And we know that our editors at magazines do write pieces, but it's always easier. Like, I don't know if I've ever met anyone who said that editing is harder than actually putting the piece together. So writing itself, you're in the arena, right? You're fighting the fight, you're doing the battles, like you can imagine the Coliseum or whatever, but there's someone in the stands that's like, hey, why didn't you do this? And you're like, well, I'm doing all this other stuff. There's like lions and tigers and bears and like other gladiators. Like, I'm trying my best. Like, I'm putting it together. And I always kind of feel like that's kind of the idea you should think about, is like the editing process. It's a lot easier to find holes once the thing's already been made and someone starts really looking at it. Like, the idea of taking all of this knowledge and research and interviews and whatever your piece is, putting it in writing, making it readable for people, making it fun to read, that's hard to do. And then someone comes by and they're like, poke, poke, poke. That's a lot easier than someone who takes all of this information, amalgamates it together, and makes it readable and fun and exciting for the audience, and gets the audience to take action, or gets the audience to understand what the brand stands for, or builds brand trust, or gets downloads or shares or likes or clicks or comments, whatever. So always kind of think of it that way. Like, the criticism part is like, there's another quote that I think is helpful too here, is that nobody makes statues of critics, right? Like, there might be like a few statues of critics, like maybe like, you know, like super famous people who did whatever. But most of the time, statues are made of people who tried really hard and did, okay, stop growling at me. Do you want to come up here and say hello? I'm gonna squeeze you. I'm gonna bring you up here and make you say hello over here. All right, hold on. So most of the time, statues are made, she's just like upset because he's on her thing, and statues are made of people who are actually trying and actually doing the hard stuff, right? They're the people who are working really hard to make that content wonderful. And it's a lot easier to be an editor or to be someone coming in and finding the holes. Like, that's just way easier than actually doing the whole thing. So the criticism part and the mindset part is like, you have to feel good about submitting your work. You have to feel good about letting your work stand. Like, you're like, I created it, it will stand, you know, it'll live in this ocean of uncertainty, and then I'll get feedback. But you have to get to this point of like peace over submitting your work and being like, this was the best I could do right now. That's it. Hey, Annie, welcome in. Let's see. Vesna says, I had a client add grammatical errors to the final edit and publish it. Yeah, it made me sad. I've had that happen to me too. And that's one of the things I was talking about, right? Is that sometimes you have these clients that like think they know more stuff than you, and sometimes they do. That's true. Sometimes they do. But oftentimes they don't. And then you end up in this situation where you're like, now I can't use this piece because you put all these errors in it, and now what am I going to do? So sometimes, the other thing that you can do here is save the original. So one of the things that I think I did back in the day when I didn't have a ton of clips, I know I did this, but if there was a piece that had a bunch of errors or I wasn't proud of it, I would show the original piece. And I would like, if I was sending that as a sample, I would say, here's the original that I created and here's the version that my client published. And then they can see the changes. Like they can see like, oh, she didn't make those grammatical errors, they did. And then there's kind of like this, there's at least like they can see the raw version of your work, and then they can see like the published version, and they may not catch the errors too, but that's an option. All right. Hey, Annie. Margaret says, yeah, we missed you too, Annie. We're glad you're back. All right. Margaret says, would you say that I'm going to pop my 3 off of here real quick. Hold on. All right. Would you say that the editorial process with the client should be included in the way that we assess our client boundaries? What are some reasonable factors to consider? Yes. So your editorial process, there is a point where, like, some people in their contracts say, I'm only going to do 2 rounds of edits. I don't say that. I have adopted for a long time that I just write the piece until they're satisfied with it, or like we end the like if something goes wrong and we're just not a fit for each other, we just end the contract. So for me, the boundaries are like, what edits will you take and won't you take? And then do you trust that person to make good judgment? Do you understand their audience at a level that they do, or the things that they're driving at? Like they can explain to you what their audience wants and how the edit will help them get the thing they want, or help them understand why they need this product or service. So the editorial process with your clients and editors should be your boundaries of like, what is reasonable and unreasonable, right? Like if they're asking you to do dozens and dozens of edits, like over and over again, like if they give you a doc 12 times to do edits, that's different than someone giving you a doc filled with edits like that you need to make just to get to the next round. Because there are magazines where you just submit your work and you have like 4 editors and they look at it and it takes a lot of effort to get through it, but you have to get through it. But yeah, the idea is that some people end up in these situations where they end up doing edits for a long time. Like they submit a doc and then they get more edits, and they submit a doc and they get more edits. And if you find that that's part of like a difficult, that keeps happening, put that in your contract that there's only 2 rounds of edits or whatever. I haven't had that issue, like knock on wood, I haven't had that issue. I know other people have. So my content just says, like my contract says that I'll fix the content until they're happy with it. Or, my contract says like, if either client or freelancer gives 15 days notice, you can cancel the contract. And I've had that happen to me where we're like, hey, we're not on the same wavelength. Like what I'm doing and what you want are not the same. We should just cancel the contract. And that happens. That just happens. But when you're thinking about reasonable factors, it's like, how many times have you submitted the doc? It's not necessarily always about how many edits are in that first piece, because sometimes you just bomb the piece and you have to fix it. And sometimes you thought you understood one thing, but you misinterpreted it, and you misinterpreted it through the whole piece. So now you have to go back and fix everything. I also think a reasonable factor is like, once you start going through their edits, are those edits making sense? Like, can you trust that this is a fact, that they're doing the right thing? And as you go through them, you're like, oh, that makes more sense. And most of the time, like I said, like 9 times out of 10, I'm like, I agree with their edits. I'm like, oh yeah, we should do that. The other factor to consider is like, if they're making your work worse, right? Like the quality is suffering. The other factors are they, like sometimes you just get people who had a bad day and they shit all over your writing, and then you have a call with them and you're like, can you walk me through this? And they're like, I had a bad day, and like, blah, blah, blah. Like it's sometimes that just is reflected outwardly, right? So you get this negative feedback, you get these harsh edits because someone's not looking at your piece objectively, and that's fine. That's why we get on calls. But I think that as writers, and I think this is natural a lot of times in writers, I've noticed it, for me, it's been one of my strongest characteristics, is being curious. That's why we like research. That's why we like to figure things out. That's why we like to create content, right? We create things out of nothing. Like you start with a blank page and you end up with something that actually helps someone or helps them do or achieves something or solves a problem or answers a question for them. Oh my gosh, why are you so sassy today? Come here. Oh my goodness. Okay, you don't have to say hello, but you gotta stop borking at me. So, yeah, I think the deal is that you have to kind of figure out over time, like what's actually reasonable and what makes sense for you. Oh my goodness. And I think, yeah, the most important thing is that the quality isn't suffering and that the reader is still getting the thing that they need. The reader is still getting help. But you creating something out of nothing is a big deal. Like, that's hard to do. And actually getting it to have people do stuff is a big deal. Let's see if there's anything else I can think of. I think that it's also a learning process. Like I said, you have to learn what boundaries make sense for you, what things that you will and won't do, what things compromise your quality and what things don't, what types of edits make sense. And then there's other things too, like, are you being really overprotective of your work? Like, sometimes there's writers that just won't compromise. They're like, this is the work and you will publish it as is. I don't think that's helping them. I don't think it's making them a better writer. I don't think it's making their piece shine for that publication and those readers. I think that you should always keep that in the back of your mind. Like, who's actually reading this and who will actually get help from it? That's way more important. Because they're the ones who will consume it. And the fact that it works for them, that consumption will be like they share it with someone else and someone else and someone. That is way better. Like, that's a way bigger factor than worrying about like whether or not, you know, the edits. I see you, Sassy. I'm gonna pick you up and you're gonna have to say hello to everyone. Come here. Come here, Sass Machine. Ugh. We got a Sass Machine. You see her bug eyes? She's wagging her tail. Good girl. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, so I think that was it, Margaret. I think those are all the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, like the editing process and the harsh feedback and the multiple editors part, you will learn over time. The more clients you work with, oh, I think she drooled on my face. You'll learn more about like what to do and what not to do and the quality thing and the audience thing and what things make sense and whether or not you need more boundaries with your clients. Hi, buddy. And whether or not you see that the work has been changed enough that it's harming the reader, basically. Okay, let's see. Marie says, some of those clients that fix our work need shrunken whites, elements of style. Yeah, so sometimes they don't understand like actual grammar and stuff, and yeah. Marie says, I wrote a piece that was good. My client mangled it, but paid really well. So I smiled at my bank account and he was happy and I was glad it wasn't bylined. Yeah, sometimes that's what happens. Like, that's part of it. Sometimes what happens is you get a piece, you're really proud of it. Like, you're really happy about it. And then the final published version is way different than what you started and you're not happy with it. And you feel like the quality is worse. It's not helping the reader as much. And like I said, like, you don't have to share that version with potential clients. You don't have to publish it on your portfolio. Sometimes, you know, you're like, phew, thank God that wasn't bylined. That happens sometimes. That's why I like the boat thing, because you have to release this sense of control. You can only control. I see you guys licking my pants. I know you guys are like, give us more. You have to release this sense of control because the content really isn't yours. You're getting paid to create it for a brand or create it for an editor, like a magazine. And you have to release this idea that you can control every part of the process. Like, you just can't. You are working in a team, and that's the other part. Oh, Margaret. Yes, Margaret. That's the other thing, is there should be a teamwork attitude. When you're doing these edits, your editors and clients should be thinking about this as a collaborative process. That's why I get so crazy and all up in arms about signing the right clients, because that filters through every process, including edits and including feedback. It should be a teamwork effort. They shouldn't be shitting on you and saying like, you're a bad writer because you made a mistake, or you're da-da-da-da-da. It should be I wonder if we do this thing, or I wonder if we should do that, or maybe you should think about this. Like, it's a collaborative teamwork process where they think about the piece as being a holistic joining effort of you and them. So that's another thing that that you should pay attention to with client boundaries is like, it has to be a teamwork effort. It has to be something that they understand is not just like all on you. It's a thing where you work together, right? You're working together to do edits or to double check things. Like, I guess I always made the assumption that my clients will fact check things. That's why I usually include links. Like, I usually include links. Sometimes I don't, just because it's like, I don't know, it's something that they gave me. Like, if they gave me a bunch of source stuff, like, I don't always include the links because I only use the links they gave me. But usually I do. Like, most of the time I include links, and then they can fact check it. And I always assume that they're like double checking that thing just in case. But yeah, that's another thing to think about. Margaret says, I care more about the relationships I develop with the client rather than monopolizing the creative process. Yeah, I think that's more important. And like I said, like, you should care not only about the client and their needs, but the reader. That's like, when people ask about why content goes viral, that's because of the reader. That's because of the consumer of the content. That's because they know what that group wants, and then the content goes viral because they just hit all the right buttons. It has nothing, like, that's the part that people miss. They're like, we need content that needs good ROI and follows all our KPIs and by DOB and blah, 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 like all these things, right? Or EOB, end of business, or end of day, right? EOD. So anyways, what you care about is like the actual function that the reader is going to take. Are they going to download something? Are they going to like it, share it, understand something, walk away with trust in that brand that they can help them? That's way more important than worrying about being a dictator, like Margaret said, over the creative process. Like, you basically have most of the creative process anyways. The edits are like after you've created the thing. Oh, gross. Thank you for coughing on my foot. The creative process, you have most of it, right? Are you okay? Do we need to call the geriatric vet? The edits are the back end. The edits are the back end. So you contain most of the time, most of the creative process of like actually putting the puzzle together. So yeah, I would care more about the relationships with your clients and the relationships with your readers and learning that audience and being able to create stuff that actually makes a difference for the reader. That's what gets the results. Like, that's the thing that makes a difference. All right. Margaret says, yes, queen. I wonder if that was for Charlotte when I picked her up because she's all wild. I see you down there. I see you. All right. Can you guys go to your hobble holes? All right. If you feel like this has been helpful so far, hold on, I puts the button. So if you feel like this has been helpful so far, give it a thumbs up. If you feel like you want to learn more about dealing with edits and editors or building a high-earning freelance writing business, subscribe. I'm also curious if you have dealt with edits and editors in different ways than I have. So if you have felt like you have, can you go back to your hobble hole? Boop. All right, Minnie, go back to your hobble hole. If you feel like you have dealt with them in a different way and you want to share that in the comments, boop, other one, good job. You share that in the comments below if you're watching this as a replay. I'm always interested is if there are processes that other people use for edits, or if there's processes that other people use for writing their content, because I think that that's super interesting. So drop a comment below if you have anything to share and you're watching this later on. And I think, you know, yeah, like I said, like, high five. Good girl. Other one. Good job. Collaborating with clients, I think, is the most important thing. And like I said, keeping the reader in the back of your mind is important. And then dealing with criticism is normalized. Normalize the fact that as a writer, you're going to be critiqued. You're going to get feedback. It's going to be harsh and it's going to be nice. There's going to be a whole spectrum of stuff. What you are looking for is that the quality and the readers and the client, like the whole goal is still in focus rather than getting too granular on the piece itself and being like, no, it has to be this and we have to do this. No, it doesn't have to be anything. Like, it has to, you know, it has to meet the needs of the people reading it. That's pretty much it. And of course be, you know, fun to read and exciting and all that stuff. So, okay. I think those are all my points. I think I got through all my main points. So, we're here every Friday. We have these guys. They've been a little sassy, but, Bo, You look like you're like an owl. You look like you're just like an owl in a tree, like waiting for your bird mom to feed you. Good job. If all right. Oh, hold on. Do you want one more? Okay. Other one. Oh, you didn't even make it. High five. Good job. All right, buddy. One more. Good job. Yeah, I like what Getty says too, that we're collaborating with them. We're not just order takers. And I think that's an important piece when it comes to edits too, is that we're not order takers, but we're doing those edits because we've thought through why we should do them and if they're helpful, and that we have aligned ourselves with clients who think about it as a collaborative experience. All right, people. So we're here every Friday at noon Central Time with a new live stream. If you ever have a topic or a question that you want me to cover in the live stream, you can always go to mandyellis.com/question and pop something in there. And I've done tons of topics and questions that have been added by subscribers and have been added by people on my email list. Oh, that's another thing. Free pricing guide. If you're wondering what you should charge for the work we just talked about, you can go to mandyellis.com/pricing guide and get my free pricing guide. I update it regularly. I'm actually about to update it because I had someone ask for something and I was like, oh, we should add that. And by we, I guess I just mean me and these two gremlins. But I'm going to update it soon. But yeah, you can join the email list where I give out like quick hit tips in my newsletter. And then here it's just a lot longer. I'm allowed to actually explain things a little bit more. So thanks so much for hanging out. Hope you guys have a great Friday, and